uh, 14 years seems like a long, long time ago, but I just took a little snippet out of his work and wanted to present it today because I feel like it's absolutely prescient and still. And it's really, really, it is the basis for where we build up our practice between analytics and target. So the first thing we do in analytics, for any analytics practitioners out there who are on the line, these functions like standard, I'm going to just sort of point to the screen, like standard reporting, asking what happened, are obviously bread and butter. It's what we do every day. Ad hoc reports, things where we get questions from the business and we drill in and do query and drill down, and those functions are part of our everyday life. When we get into AI and ML, we start to do more sophisticated things like statistical analysis, forecasting, extrapolation, even predictive modeling. We have some functions being released and rolling out in analytics labs. So if you haven't clicked on the labs button, it's rolled out for everyone. We have functions that we're rolling out for analytics that do that do forecasting, extrapolation, predictive modeling, right? So that's now, it's happening, and it's easier than ever. And that's what makes, I think, this sort of statement that Thomas Davenport made, that he made 14 years ago so prescient, is that at the top of all that, one of the most, and probably the most important thing, in fact, I used to say this in meetings with customers where we had optimization teams and analytics teams at the table at the same time, that all roads lead to optimization, or a hard left turn into the ditch. So we don't want to go there. We always want to go to optimization. And the question we always ask is, if we manage it or if we measure it, can we move it? Can we make it? Can we change that metric? And I would ask that sort of cutting question in meetings, where it becomes pretty quickly, it becomes apparent that we can't change the metric, or the alternative is we create a hypothesis that says, can we? I believe we can. And so we use Adobe Target to test hypotheses. In fact, I had a really, really good friend in a past job, in a past life, who was a marketer that I worked with, and my job was business intelligence, data and insights. His job was to act on my insights and to do things based on our recommendations, based on the data. And he used to tell me all the time, I'm not a good marketer, I'm a good tester. And that was where we really found and really came to believe that optimization is the ultimate goal and path of every single insight that we bring to the business. So with that, we're going to jump into some use cases. So the first, and these are idea starters. These clearly aren't the end-all, be-all to optimization, to testing, to targeting, and personalization, but they are great places to start. So let's talk about testing on page level testing. It is the obvious place to start, but I think there are clear ways to go about this, and these are best practices. So when we start with page level testing, these could be entry pages, they could be campaign based pages, and they could also be just normal flow pages. We would use site sections to sort of break that down and understand the hierarchy of the site. For most customers, regardless of industry, so almost all the customers I talk to, we are going to have a very predictable flow where you would go from landing or home to sort of either nav or search, or we'll talk about finding methods in a minute, but you do some functions like finding the product that you're looking for, the information or the content that you're looking for, and then if the conversion funnel has already happened, then we would be looking at content consumption and other functions. But if the conversion funnel is consistent and repeatable, then we're talking about product views, product detail views. We're probably talking about buy flow. And so when we look at page analytics, we should be thinking about site sections, hierarchies, and multiple functions in analytics, like looking at acquisition pages in a chunk in that sort of measurement, or traffic. We should be looking at engagement opportunities, so pages where we engage customers, and we should be looking at conversion pages. So even if we just broke our thought process into those three sections, acquisition, engagement, conversion, we would have a better understanding of how to break up this use case. So that's the first thing. And we would want to look at high bounce rates, or single page visits, those sorts of things as a start for tests, or as a primer or hypothesis testing there. And then also underperforming pages as a comparable, so we would do comparative analytics there. In the real world, we have a customer who, a financial services customer, who they were able to increase product page visits by 64% by optimizing the upper funnel. So that would be something like, if we're looking at acquisition, they acquire the customer who might be looking at credit cards, for example, and the thing that the bank wanted to do is get these customers as quickly as possible to looking at product comparison pages. So like comparing credit cards side by side, and they used Adobe Target to optimize that from landing to product comparison or product page visits and get customers there. Now, a next iteration might be, now that we've got the page so quickly, we increase the views on the product by 64%. We were able to move that metric. Let's see if we can move the conversion from that steps. And then break those into bite-sized chunks and see if we can, and we'll show you later in the follow-up how we measure that, and then see if we can improve it by comparing control, like a challenger experience, or recipes, experience 1, experience 2, experience 3, recipes 1, 2, 3, etc. We'll show you that later. Next one. We've talked about product finding methods. Product finding methods are those or not analytics practitioners. It's a very simple way you can implement this very easily. First of all, on Adobe Analytics. Second of all, with product finding methods, we're talking about the way in which, and these can be new areas, they're not always perfectly straight, but I'll give them. We're talking about the way in which our visitors get to key parts of the conversion path. So first might be nav. Could be top nav, could be sub nav, could be left nav, right? So there's that. It could also be search. And if it's nav, we could just say this is browse as a category and break down and have some lower level detail under that category. It could be search. It could be other stuff. So what we want to do is look at those, understand what those are, their definitions, and then we also want to identify those top performing methods and see if we can optimize, see if there's opportunities to sort of move the metric and improve the metrics there. Those metrics or product finding methods could be the conversion metrics themselves, like can I optimize a product finding method against orders, or a product finding method against content consumption. So we want to optimize the usability. We can use various methods for that in Target, and remove or de-emphasize underperforming methods. Those are some options. We had a customer, a very large retail customer, who they were able to reduce the finding on the conversion path using finding methods, reduce 8 clicks down to 1. And the subsequent result was that they saw a 5% increase in order volume. And so in Target, we see that report as lift in confidence. Lift in that test would be on order volume or on orders proper. When we talk about A for T, we could be also utilizing Adobe Analytics metrics for that in our measurement. So that's important. Another option is to use the cross-sell reporting. Jen Lasser, and I have a link there. You can click on that link and watch her video on YouTube. Jen Lasser is our Adobe Analytics analysis workspace product manager. She's phenomenal. If you've probably seen her videos. There's a YouTube channel full of her videos, and she's fantastic. She presents at Summit every year. She has this cross-sell reporting where you're able to identify and break down products that are commonly sold together. Now, that function uses the filters function in Adobe Analytics. So for Target users who are maybe less familiar with that interface, that video is going to be very useful. Or you can just turn, and we'll talk about this in a minute, you can just turn to your analytics counterparts and ask them to help build that report where you can look at cross-sell reporting. Now, this is where, and again, a very specific sort of take on this. If we're using the cross-sell report to identify items that are commonly sold together, we can use recommendations. Now, I believe recommendations are for Target Premium customers. So you could use that, or you could take the category affinity approach. So you need to decide which one is better for you based on your SKU or the availability of that solution to you, or utilizing category affinity to increase revenue per order, right? The cross-sell effort. The second iteration could be looking at cohorts. So if you're familiar, and I'll show one of these later, if you're familiar with cohort 2.0 in Adobe Analytics, 2.0 is a much richer version than 1.0 of cohort. In fact, when I look at cohorts a few years ago when it first came out. Maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago when it first came out. It was just saying a very simple query, which is actually pretty difficult to execute in SQL because there's a whole bunch of things you have to consider. But it's very simple when we look at the logic. It's customers who did one thing, one important thing, who also did another important thing, or we can reverse the logic. But let's just say visitors who, in this case, it would be visitors who made a purchase, maybe with a couple of other items that fit into that category affinity, and then came back and made another purchase. And so we can optimize the category affinity approach based on that and looking at cohorts. Now with cohorts 2.0, you can segment the cohort. So you can say customers who made a purchase previously in a certain segment and then came back later and made another purchase in that segment or in another segment potentially. So again, we can look at that logic and utilize and optimize our category affinity approach. Let's talk about flow reporting. So I'll show an example later of this. I love the flow report. I had to learn how to use it because it's not always perfectly straightforward. We've made some significant improvements to flow over the last year or so, though. So the first improvement to flow that we've made is you have this option to eliminate repeat instances from the counts, which is really, really important and useful, especially for target use cases. So there's that option that's improved it. The second option is, and I'll show you this example later, that you can drop the flow report into its own panel and filter it. So that's for looking specifically at target flows, where you have an experience or a test that's in place and you want to watch how the flow changes or differs from the baseline, from the control group, etc. So that's super useful. So we would use the flow report to first identify normal problems where there isn't a test running, and problematic paths. Problematic paths might show up as like churn, like you see people churning from one page and they sort of cycle through that page multiple times, or they don't go the direction you think they should go, like they suddenly take a left-hand turn and instead of doing a common path, which might be landing, search, product view, they suddenly take another a left-hand turn and do search again and product view again and search again and so on. So you can identify problematic paths. So examples of that, we would use entry and exit functions to identify dead ends. So you can start with the end and say, well, what's the leading sort of cause or page related to exit, or what happens right after entry on a certain campaign page, etc. So we could utilize those functions in Flow. Again, filtering flow is a really important one. And then another really, really useful function in Flow is to do a mixed dimension flow report. So there's an article on that that's not in our links, helpful links, but I can add it later if you want to look at the mixed dimension flow report, or you can go to HelpX for Adobe Analytics and look that one up. It's really easy to find the article on that. Very useful. The other thing about it, and maybe the most important thing about it, especially when we look back at my slide, my Thomas Davenport slide on optimization. After we do that analysis, we could easily create a sequential segment by right-clicking on a node in the flow report and it builds a segment for me. That saves me massive amount of time. So an example there. When I build a sequential segment, that might be something like visitor did this and then a very specific thing. Maybe it's segmented. Maybe it's in a very specific site section, so I have to add a dimension there. And then I need to make sure the container's right. And I need to make sure it's excluding repeat instances. That takes me about 30 minutes to build the segment. No matter how good I've gotten at building segments and checking my logic and making sure the logic is really good before I even start to build the segment, it takes me about 30 minutes. And almost inevitably, I have to phone a friend. And phoning a friend means calling up my friend Kayla, who is a ninja at Target and Analytics together, Kayla Cusack. She's on my team, so I might have to call her and say, am I thinking about this right? Just want to check my logic, right? Most of us need that in our daily job, especially with how important the logic is to these things. When you build a flow report and you build it and do everything that I've talked about beforehand, and you right-click on the node and you say, build my segment for me, it does it for you, literally pops up. And that, in my case, saves me 30 minutes every single time. Every single segment I have to build, it saves me 30 minutes. So that's a really important function. I can go get lunch now, or with all that time saved, I can turn my attention to other important hypotheses. Okay, so there's that. Oh yeah, one more note. I'm going to back up. This little asterisk, segment share and latency has dramatically improved. So it used to be about 24 hours when you would create a segment in Adobe Analytics and click send or share to Experience Cloud so the target could pick it up. It used to be about 24 hours. Now it's been reduced to 4 to 8 hours. That means that we can do same-day personalization or same-day testing on insights that dramatically increases our ability to operate and action on key segments. We can even potentially be doing next visit optimization and personalization. So that's super, super powerful that that's been improved. And that's the case with any segment that you create in analytics and send to the Experience Cloud for any solution to pick up, including Target. Let's talk about the Fallout report. So we would want to use the Fallout report. Okay, here's the big difference between Fallout and Flow. Flow is specifically designed for answering questions and exploring new paths. Like, I don't know the answer. I don't know the path that the customer is going to take. I think I know, but let's see, by page, by site section, by prop, and that sort of thing in Flow. Fallout is the opposite. It's where I do know the path. Maybe my experience designers have created a very specific happy path for my customers, and it's anticipated. It's all the content is designed to get customers down this path in a happy, informative experience as possible. And so Fallout report is like just your funnel, right? It's key funnel events. Now, while that sounds very, very simple, in reality, and it is simple to build, very simple, but in reality, what that allows us to do is it allows us like endless flexibility on how to build this funnel. Now, if many of you maybe remember back in the Omniture days, when I wanted to build my funnel, I had to go build like one version of it, and then that was available for reporting against. With Fallout, you can build any number of versions. So if I'm an owner over, and maybe this is a retail scenario, if I'm an owner over the path to conversion that requires some key steps, like for Adobe.com, for Creative Cloud subscriptions, for example, the key step might be that they come to Adobe.com, they have to sign in, because with Adobe.com, you have to sign in. So there's that step. That's 2 steps. You land on a certain page, you sign in, then you look at products, and maybe we're talking about Photoshop. And you look at Photoshop, maybe you watch a piece of content, you add it to cart, you add it to your plan, and then you check out, and then you download an app. That's like the app, Photoshop. So that's like a 5, 6, 7-step funnel. But it might be wildly different if we're talking about the Document Cloud business, right, for Acrobat Pro, DC. It might be wildly different if I'm an owner over a booking engine in the travel and hospitality industry, right, where those steps are wildly different than what I just described. So the cool thing about Fallout is I have that flexibility to do that. And what we want to do is measure friction in that path, meaning fallout, or we want to measure opportunity. And maybe I can set up a couple of different paths with a few different steps and measure those 2 side by side, right? So we want to compare Fallout also across segments. So when I build the Fallout, it's this vertical sort of segmentation of the flow, of the customer flow. And then I can segment that vertically to compare those, and you'll see that in a minute. Once that's done, and it's very fast, I can build one in a few minutes. Once I know the steps, I can build them even faster in a few minutes. Once that's done, I'm going to use the right-click feature again. As I compare parts of the funnel, it could be up funnel, it could be down funnel. I compare parts of the funnel, I see opportunities for testing. I want to right-click, create a segment, and again, that segment is fully built out. We'll show you that. All right, so that's enough for use cases. I hope that's a good primer for opportunities you might have, ideas to allow you some creativity, maybe run across the aisle and go work with your analytics folks, because I know we're talking mostly to folks who are practitioners in Target. I want to make a comment about that. In my time, I've been at Adobe almost 5 years, and most of my job, about 90% of it, is to work directly with customers in customer engagements who have one or more products. Typically, our very best customers have Adobe Analytics and Adobe Target together because, and I'll explain this in a minute. Well, yeah, because, let me wait on that one. They have the solutions together, and you know what's absolutely mind-blowing is, first, when I visit customers who the optimization team and the analytics team aren't working together at all, hardly. The sort of optimization teams are just doing tests because you got a backlog of tests you got to get to and you got to prove your value and do your thing, and you got a whole bunch of tests to run. And the analytics teams over here doing their job and coming up with insights and reporting up and doing ad hoc and drill down and all the things we showed earlier. And they're not talking to each other. So that's the first thing, is the number one thing I've seen in my 5 years at Adobe with those two products is success, wild success, where those teams were working together and coordinating tightly. And A for T, the technological approach to getting those two systems to talk to each other, is just part of it. We have to align the people in the process and walk across the aisle and have meaningful interactions on a regular basis. So while we're talking about technology and connecting technology, we also know we have to support it with people and process. I am going to focus on the technology part here when we talk about approaches in Adobe Target. Now that we have insight and we have ideas and we have creative approaches to moving the metrics that we're seeing from analytics. Now, ideas don't always have to come from analytics, clearly. So, but this is a fantastic approach where we sort of wash, rinse, repeat with insight, and then now we're going to decide our approach in Target. So, yeah, here we go. Step 2, decide your approach in Target. So the first thing we're going to do in Target is start with Visual Experience Composer. Obviously, it's the easiest interface to work with for most optimization users. Some, if you prefer direct code access, that's cool too. But Visual Experience Composer, clearly a fast, friendly way, point, click, drag, drop, that sort of thing, and build our experience in VEC, Visual Experience Composer. Now, once we've done that, we can control or automate our process for that target, for that experience that we've just created. And obviously manual is an option. We can manually decide how to split up the traffic, right? But marketer can decide how that traffic gets split up. Or auto allocate is available, and that's using AI ML, that's using Sensei. And it's using the AI ML engine to automatically show new visitors the best performing experience. So clearly, I think that's a compelling opportunity for those of you out there who have not used auto allocate yet. That's so available for for Target standard users. So auto allocate is going to automatically show the best performing experience. The reporting, so you can see this little asterisk where it's coming soon for A for T. The reporting for these, Drew can probably clarify this a little bit later, and I'll let him. But the reporting for that is going to be available very soon for A for T. So if you want to look at those reports. The other option, the next option, using AI and ML, is to auto-target using for personalized experience. So what that's going to do is automatically target visitors with the best experience to maximize the business goal. And that's available for Target Premium, right? So when you do that, you have this control in creating your activity where you can manually control it, or you can turn it over to AI ML and auto allocate, or you can auto personalize. So those functions are critical. And then when we do that, so this is where insight can absolutely start with our experience creation in Target. And then we can look at the insights in analytics and iterate. So that's key. And we need that A for T integration to do that and that reporting. All right, so let's look at a couple of the other artificial intelligence built-in machine learning algorithms for Target. So the first one we covered, auto allocate. Earlier in my category affinity, in my cross-sell report, I talked about the option to employ recommendations when we're looking at cross-sell reporting. We could also use the category affinity approach. So recommendations are available for Target Premium customers as well. So you might consider, if you have both options and you're using Target Premium, you might consider using recommendations and doing the personalized suggestions in that case where we're using cross-sell reporting as the way to sort of understand what's going on, and then use category affinity as my option, or just employ recommendations and then remeasure and see what's working and what's not. So that's critical. And then auto personalization, we already sort of mentioned that. And then there's also auto target, right, where each visitor sees the experience that wins every time for that visit. every visit. Okay, a couple of other key reports, and this, again, it suggests more interaction between analytics and target teams. Well, let's just say analytics or intelligence and optimization teams, right? So the important attributes report in Target gives us insight into which parts of the experience, which behaviors or which functions of the experience are contributing the most or potentially could contribute to winning experiences, right? So this absolutely, these are insights that the optimization team can bring to the analytics team where we're working together to say, hey, I have these insights that I want to bring to the table. We want to measure these later and look at these specifically together as we do testing and optimization. Or clearly, these can just operate inside of Target, and you can create tests based on outputs from this report. So I think that's really, really important to further our testing and personalization strategy. All right, let's just skip the animation. Okay, automated segments report from Sensei. So I love this. So we're using an algorithm to reveal key segments that are statistically significant. This is like, if you're familiar with analytics, this is sort of like clustering. It is clustering with a different name, right, and in Target. And so what this is doing a clustering job for you. Now, I think it's incumbent upon us, and this is where we, again, where intersecting analytics and optimization teams, collaborating, coordinating together is really, really important. Because as a best practice, as an analytics person, I would always want to look at a segment that's been pre-built by the system, by the AI, and see what's in there, clearly understand what's building up that segment, and then test it. And I would look at, in my past life, I would look at my friend Aaron, who's a great tester, not a great marketer, and I would say, yeah, sure, let's do it, let's measure it. Let's see what this looks like. Also, I want to know what's in it. So let's see what those segments or clusters look like. We would do the same thing in analytics. In fact, there are functions in labs in analytics where there's a segment builder, and it will build segments for you that you're missing or haven't seen yet that are important, statistically significant. So we can leverage both of them. We should leverage both of these solutions to further our practice, to further our testing strategy. So yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. And the insights that come from optimization are different from the insights that come from analytics and those practitioners. So I think these are very, very valuable and important tools that we bring together and collaborate with. Okay, the last part of this, the three-step process is to check a box. I mean, that's straightforward. That's really easy. So let's check the box. So what that means is we're going to click use analytics metrics and connect our targeting and testing and personalization to analytics and make sure that that data all flows out. So when you do this and you select a report suite to select analytics metrics in your testing, personalization, optimization practice, when you do this, it is important that you understand and at very minimum understand what the metrics are and mean that you're selecting from analytics, because they do have different meanings if they're being defined in Target versus being defined as behavioral sort of tracking in Adobe Analytics on a site or on a mobile app or things like that. So it's just incumbent upon us that we are looking at the SDR or have the data dictionary with us or have an analytics counterpart that we're working with and collaborating with and coordinating with to do these functions. So once you do that, I think now we have all the connections we need technologically to do it. We just need the people and process connections that really drive this practice, and we just iterate and iterate and iterate. All right, so let's crack open analytics. Let's look at some key things. I want to show you some shortcuts. Now this is the fallout report, and I'm going to show you how to segment the fallout report. But before we do, I want to show you a quick shortcut. This is a big time saver. So up in the top left of the screen, you can see my red box that's hovering over the this is the components area. If you're working in analytics, you're going to use this components area like crazy. And if you're familiar with it, you'll know that there is probably a gigantic list for all of us of components, dimensions, metrics, segments, time, And if I search there, there's a gigantic list that I have to search through. So I just want to show you a shortcut. If you're not familiar with the search box, go in and hit hashtag, also known as Shift3, and start to type target. And it will find you this little tag called Adobe Target. And what that will do is it will narrow down the list of search results immediately to all of your A for T integrated target options, data options, metrics, and dimensions. And so once you do that, you can click, and you'll see this in my next slide. You'll see me click on, I've already got it highlighted, there's my tag, and boom, I'm going to go grab my control experience and segment up my fallout, my funnel by the control experience and also experience A, B, C. So I'm comparing them all side by side and looking at my key paths. So that might be, you know, this is a buy funnel, a buy flow, right, where I'm looking at the buy flow steps and it's like 5 or 6 steps, and I want to look at the effect of my experiences against the control and see which one is best. Now, this is where I'm absolutely going to find an insight about which one is performing the best or the worst, and right-click and create a new iterative segment to start analyzing and find some insight and potentially have a new hypothesis and again, create more iterations on my tests. So we're going to show you the segment function. So that's where I do find my insight. Right-click that, create segment from touchpoint. In this case, that's what the text says. And then we want to pop that segment. And what we're going to see is that the segment is pre-built. It's got the target experience built in for the one I selected. It's got all of the buy flow steps built in. The then logic, you can see then statements, and then the magical button, click to make this an Experience Cloud audience to be picked back up in Target or another solution, and then select my my audience creation window, and boom, off it goes. And within 4 to 8 hours, it's available for that solution to pick up. Again, the notion of next visit optimization or same-day testing. Okay, let's look at the page flow. So this is the flow visualization. Earlier, when I was talking about it, I sort of mentioned that you want to create a flow in its own panel. I think it's really, really useful in certain scenarios to create flow in a panel. So this big outer sort of window comes from the panel area. I drop that in and I segment this. You can see that I'm segmenting this flow by experience B. And what I would do, and again, you're going to want to look at the analytics videos if you're not familiar with radial filters. I can grab my experiences, drop them in, hold the shift button, drop them over there, and then filter by experience A, B, C, control, etc. And quickly just toggle between those filters. Now I have flow. And so I'm looking at page flow, entry, and then next page, next page. So this is the page level flow reporting. We could be doing this drops and things like that we're measuring, and probably be more finite details on the page, like very specific clicks that are happening, and links that are being clicked, and so on. So that's a very key way to look at target, experience data in a flow visualization, and then we're going to show you the create segment path. So I like part of the node. This is like third click in. I select that, and then I'm going to click create segment path. So once I do that, it's going to automatically do very critical things for me. Again, saving me 30 minutes every time I build a segment from my flow report, or from any other report for that matter. This is going to automatically build this very level segment, and that's my flow. Let me back up. That's because up here, there's a little gear icon next to this bug. That's because this flow allows me to segment the view on visitors, which means looking at all of the visitor behavior across the life of the feed, or inside of a visit. Now, with experience flows, I would be mostly looking at the visit, but it could be visitor. So in this case, I selected visitor. And then the other critical thing that it does for me is it makes sure that all of these functions are non-repeating instances, that it has that logic built into the dimension as it's building the segment. That's also critical. That keeps this a very, very clean and tidy segment, saving me a massive amount of time. And then I can, again, click to make an Experience Cloud segment and send that up for further iteration. All right, now let's build a cohort. So I'm having a little, oh, there we go. Let's build a cohort. That slide is empty. We can go to the next. Slide. think you're seeing an empty slide. That's what I'm seeing. Let's go to the next
Jordan,
one.
we're actually seeing the slide. It's probably just taking a second to update on your end. But
Okay.
if you want me to restart that demo for you,
no, I'll talk to it. It's great. I have this one memorized. So when you build a cohort, remember earlier when I said it takes me, oh, there it is, it's popping up. It takes me in SQL like at least a few days to build a cohort in SQL and validate the data and create temp tables and do the, and again, cohort is visitors who did this who also did that. Or it could be, reverse logic, visitors who did something and then did not do something that I thought was really important, and I want to make sure I isolate the group who did not do it. So in cohort, we have that ability. We had that ability with 1.0, but with 2.0, now we can segment the cohort. We can add multiple metrics to the cohort. We can do latency tables, churn tables instead of retention tables. So it shows us the opposite, those who are falling out instead of staying in the cohort. And we can break it down by product or by custom dimension, and I'll show you that in my next slide. So that's a critical set of functions in cohort. It makes it so much more useful. Visitors who entered the experience and did something critical, who then also, did something else that was really, really important to our conversion funnel or our engagement funnel or so on. So this is a very useful report. When I build it, here's what the result set looks like. If I don't, so the standard result set, this is visitors who did a product view, were a part of an experience, came back and did an order and were a part of that experience. So that's the logic in the report: inclusion metric, return metrics, and segmentation. They were in experience B the whole time, and then it shows it by date and then breaks it out by date. In this week, the 1 week later, they were in the return criteria and in experience B, and this is how many did it, 2.1%, right? That sort of thing. And I can create a segment from any cell in that table, and that's really useful because when I create the segment, it retains all of that sophisticated logic in this report. But even more importantly, and I love this breakdown, I love that they added this. What I'm doing with this one is a dimensional breakdown using product or product SKU, right? Where I want to see the visitor who did a product view who was a part of experience B, who came back and did an order, who was a part of experience B, and then I want to see what the products were that were ordered. Now I can compare, because maybe there were several sort of products in this target experience. Maybe it's a whole product line. Maybe it's the intent for us. Maybe it's the whole Creative Cloud. And I can see the breakdown by week of those who came back by product. And so here's a really, really important opportunity for insight. If I float down these product names and look at 2.3% conversion, 2.0, 2.7, 8.1. Now, the volume is very, very low. It's only 16 returning, and it's only 198 in the inclusion in the cohort. But what if I were able to recreate that volume and increase the volume? Am I not hypothesizing right now? This is why we iterate. This is why we do this, is because we see this 8.1%, 6.6%, markedly higher than the rest of them. And I could do that with these two products, Illustrator and InDesign, and say, okay, can I recreate that at a much larger volume? What does that look like? Again, if I measure it, can I move the metric? That's the insight that we want to build on as testers and optimizers, is that we need that insight to say, I hypothesize that if we up this 198 to 9,000, we could still retain the same conversion because of the way that this product operates and the way this test is working and so on. So I think that's a fantastic way to then interact between analytics and target systematically, because I can create segment from cell, and send that segment, and maybe clean it up a little or adjust some logic, but it's already built for me, and send that segment to target for further iteration, like systematically right away. I don't need to recreate all the logic, saving me massive amounts of time. All right, so just a couple more screens here. The next thing, and this is the segment compare function. So that's up in the panels area. You pull in a segment compare report. You grab two segments. In this case, I'm segmenting a control versus a challenger experience. And maybe this is clearly, and you can see from the time series analysis, this is an in-flight test. This is well on its way. It's been going a while. And so what I want to do is now compare the results over time of this of the two tests, the control experience and the challenger experience, and see how they're operating and see if there's any insight. And this graph alone is awesome, is a massive amount of insight for me, where I can look at the metric over time, my revenue per visitor metric. This is an awesome metric that this segment compare panel creates for me. And I'm looking at that my challenger experience is far exceeding the control. In fact, if I wanted to like pump up a quick win and run upstairs to Ann Lunis, my CMO, and say, hey, we are absolutely crushing it on millions of visitors in this experience with this new challenger experience, we want to go live with it. I want to make a presentation. I have the data right in front of me to start to make this presentation, at least start to build up the case to maybe cut over to a new experience full time, right? So I could be using AI and ML to do that. I could be using auto personalization. Maybe that's the challenger experience. I could be using auto target. I could be using recommendations, right? And this is how I can report on those over time, right? So very, very important ways to measure those new experiences that I'm either testing, the new personalization that's in flight, and so on. All right, so one more thing. Here's your sneak peek, and I know that many of you have been waiting for this. Jen Lasser allowed me to show you a quick peek at what the A4T panel screen is going to look like. So when you pull in the data, you can drag and drop just like the other panels, and select your metric, right? And off we go. We're going to click go, the normalizing metric, but also select your success metrics, and you can select 3. And it's going to build you up a panel that shows you the results of your test with in confidence. You can see that down here, right? We're looking, in this case, the example is we're looking at visits, orders, looks like leads down there. I can't read that very well. Conversion rate, lift, confidence in workspace, in the panel. So very good news, I think, for most of you, and that's coming. It's I would say that the timeline is generally second half 2020 this should be available, and it's already April 16th. And so, yeah, coming soon to analytics screen near you. All right, so here's what we covered today. We covered the 3-step workflow with analytics and target and that integration A4T. We covered the AI ML-based tools in Target, auto-allocate, recommendations, auto-personalization, auto-target, and some potential alternatives for our use cases, right? So we've got those. And then we did several, and hopefully many, enough to prime your creativity, to prime your conversations as you walk out of here, use cases so that you can go and work together. And that key thing, looking back at how we create competitive advantage and degree of intelligence in our organization, is to up-level our analytics game and continue around insight, continue around that focus with the ultimate goal of optimization. That means personalization, targeting, testing. So that's what we covered today. If you have any questions, I think we're going to open it up to questions now.
Thank you so much, Jordan. This is amazing, as always. It is a pleasure to have you just in terms of the detail that you can go into from an analytics perspective and sort of building out that function around Target, and then the passion that you have for it as well. So we appreciate it very, very much. Thank you for taking the time. So you got, well, first of all, I was going to put you on the spot, but you said second half. So you did say when the analytics panel is coming to Analysis Workspace. I will follow that up by saying that A4T reporting for auto-allocate and auto-target is within our next 2 releases. So the May-June timeframe. There is no release product-wise this month, but there will be in May and June. I can see that. I'm trying to see where I turn on my webcam because it was easier when we weren't presenting. But I'll be a voice sort of out there asking you these questions. So do you want to start easy? Do you want to start hard or intermediate? So we've got 3 questions, be easy, medium, or hard.
Let's go with hard first. I was like,
okay, no, it may not be hard for you, but
I eat my vegetables first, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, yeah, nice. That was going to be a follow-up question. But
okay.
What are best practices in managing metrics across analytics and target. So like, let's say we're running, or we have plans to run a target activity and we want to track a metric and we're not quite sure if it's being tracked in analytics. It might be tracked, but in a slightly different way. What if it's not being tracked in analytics? How do we manage that? And what's best practices in managing metrics after you've run an activity if, let's say, it's not valuable, or is it valuable to continue tracking? It's a tough question.
No, so let's start with the beginning. Let's make sure that we have first that let's start with the case where we want to get solid on what the metric is or what the behavioral component is that we want to measure. So as an optimization team, I would expect, and with the folks that I've worked with in optimization, they almost always have a very clear understanding of what it is that they're wanting to measure in this particular experience. And that's often in the case where they're starting with an idea that sort of starts in the optimization realm, where they're saying, hey, look, we see there's this opportunity. It's come up out of sort of our space and our view and our paradigm and perspective. So with that, I think it's always the best next step to go to the analytics counterparts and consult the data dictionary or the SDR and so on, and consult the site or application proper and do debugging to see if it's there. And so that's it, right? We have to inspect to see if, and as target folks, we optimizers, we have to be comfortable with some proxies. And so we have to decide how much squish we're comfortable with. Like, is this the exact thing we want to measure? And it is exactly what we want to move in the test or a part of the test? Or is it close, a proxy for what we want to measure or move? Because that is reality, like that is reality, where there are a lot of proxies. And so we have to decide if that's the case, whether we're going to use the proxy, and then it's really important best practice to make sure that that proxy gets documented. This is not exactly the thing we intended, but it's really, really close. And we also hypothesize that if we move that, it moves the thing we intended, right, if they're close. So there's that. I think the second part of it is if you don't have it measured at all, it's sort of a vacuum, and you really need to measure this step in the process or this particular behavior, then it's incumbent upon the analytics team to create that with specificity. So meaning like, and then also to say something like, we're going to reuse this again and again and again. This is going to be a part of iterations. And that's a way to test to see if our approach, if the test itself is going to have legs, or if it's just a one test item, So we sort of need to inspect that, and that process in tight teams can be very fast. An analytics person who knows their implementation and can debug it, meaning we use the Experience Cloud debugger to say, oh sure, yeah, this is an inbox parameter, or this is something we collect in Target all the time, but it's not being collected in analytics. What's the interplay there? How can we get this done the way we need to be measured with specificity for any given test or personalization effort? Does that answer it, Drew?
Yeah, that was perfect. That was great. We have another question. Might be hard. This is more intermediate, I think. While we're waiting for the panel and analysis workspace, what's the best method for reporting on lift in confidence for target activities?
Okay, so right now you're going to pull lift in confidence in the reports and analytics dropdown. So if you're looking at workspace, you'll see workspace is the top left button on the nav, on the upper nav. The next one over says reports. In reports, there's a dropdown, and you'll see target reporting, and it says usually A for T, has a little parentheses, or analytics for target might be the label. That's where you're going to view lift in confidence in analytics, and it's a canned report. And the downside to that is you can't really go adjust metrics and dimensions. You can't create lift in confidence on any metric. It's only the one that has been selected for that experience. And so that's the best way to do it today. The other ways, though, that I've seen in practice to not do lift in confidence per se, but to measure A for T, measure the activities and measure the experiences and measure the effort and effect, is to then go build a whole bunch of reports, which I showed today, using Flow, segmented flow, by experience. Using fallout, segmented fallout by experience or activity. Using the segment compare panel, right? Building up those reports to track those experiences and activities over time, to be able to report on them. So, for example, if I jump in the elevator with my boss or a director who needs an answer on how's testing going, I want to have right at the top of my mind an insight that's shareable, that's communicable, that helps create momentum, that helps people understand what's going on. And if that insight is hopefully it's good, hopefully it's green and up into the right, that sort of thing, where I can say, hey, yeah, actually the Challenger experience is wildly exceeding our expectation. If you want me to send you a quick view of that report, it's already built. I can just click send PDF on my in my analytics environment, and boom, off you go. So yes, measuring lift and confidence, you're going to do that in reports, but also absolutely as a best practice for optimization, who are familiar and not familiar with analytics, go in and start to utilize the features that we talked about today at a minimum.
Awesome. That's a perfect segue actually to my intermediate question. It might be, it depends, or you might give scenarios, but should a target practitioner be logging in to analytics and looking at these reports now that, or when A4T is enabled? Like, what's best practices in terms of allowing a target practitioner to go into analytics if those are two separate entities in the organization?
Yes, yes, absolutely. The optimization practitioner, the target practitioner should have an understanding of analytics. Even if, and I know, I mean, I'm going to answer the most real life answer possible. Real to life, meaning our organizations are complex. Analytics practices can be overbearing and complex, and it sort of can sound like you're going to get into the weeds. As a target practitioner, you want to be super focused on your efforts, your energy, your experiences, your hypotheses. The place you do that is, I think the place you really do that is, and get the analytics you need, is in analytics. And it's being measured every day, all day, every hit in Adobe Analytics. And so build up some screens and projects that are very focused on you. Don't get sidelined by what else is going on in there, because it can be a lot. Stay super focused on your needs in analytics, because analytics can deliver on your needs. I think the second part of that answer is, if your teams, if you're asking this, then the reality of it is you probably aren't super tight with your analytics folks, or there's been maybe a division, sort of a barrier put in place that doesn't allow you access to analytics, and you need it. Because when we go back to Thomas Davenport's slide, and it's 14 years old, but it is absolutely prescient, that when we get up to the top end and we're focusing on optimization, because all analytical insights lead to optimization or the ditch. And what that really means in business value is it leads to competitive advantage, customer loyalty, new revenue, new opportunity. That's what, for me, that's what it means. And I think it's very straightforward, the answer. I don't think it depends.
Awesome. That's great. We have one more minute for the final question. You kind of already answered it, but what's the best method then for the analytics team and optimization team to engage? Like, how often should they be meeting? What's the sort of interplay between them that should be occurring?
That's a hard question, because it's good. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
From my perspective, yeah, that's a hard question, because it does depend. From my perspective, you need to begin with a conversation. You need to keep those conversations alive.